I'm Jeff Zarnett, and this is Software Career Growth. Today, I've got a special guest, someone I used to work with at a previous company, and our subject we're going to talk about today is about system design interviews. Our goal is to help you understand what interviewers are looking for, because certainly we've done a lot of them over the years, and hopefully that will help you in landing your next role. So, hi, and welcome back. Today I'm joined by a guest, Miia. We're going to talk about what interviewers are looking for when you do a system design interview. And Miia and I used to do a lot of interviews together at a previous employer for both of us. And you know what? I know for sure I'm breaking some hearts when I say this, but I was always super happy to see Miia's name, my favorite co-interviewer, when I would see the meeting invitation, because I always thought that she handled these so well. And so I'm really happy that she will join us today to talk about this subject. Miia, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Of course, and thanks for inviting me, Jeff. I think design interviews are very interesting and they can reveal a lot of things from different people, and we're going to go more deeper into it. But overall, I'm a product manager. I have 4+ years experience in product. I've built my way in different fintechs throughout the way, and nowadays I'm building something in stealth mode with a few amazing people. So look out, e-commerce companies, something great is coming up.
All right. So we're going to talk about the system design interview, which many companies have as a stage of the interview process. And so just to be clear on some definitions, it's the kind of interview where we sit together in a room or in a Zoom call, and the interviewers present you with a problem. And the problem usually has some interesting aspects to it. It's not so straightforward where you just say, okay, given this, you choose that. But there's some design that you have to do. There's some decisions that you have to make. And in the end, hopefully you come up with a good design, and you also hopefully had a good process for getting there. And so, yeah, the subject that I want to talk about is, or what are you looking for as an interviewer? And I would say, sort of first and foremost, what would you describe as the most important thing?
I think the most important thing is the collaboration, because in the end, what we will be working together is as a team. We have goals together as a team, and what we want to get is a great product in the end. We want to solve a problem, but build a great product from that. So, and it's not going to work if someone is going to be just alone thinking about a solution. The best solutions come when we actually collaborate, give ideas. How about this? How about that? And really come together as a team, right? So I think that's kind of always been my favorite part, seeing how much people can collaborate in those calls and kind of throw back questions and iterate on it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is supposed to be a test of how we work together more so than, did you solve the problem? Although I would still say solving the problem is important. But yeah, as you say, the dynamic in the room is what's really important. Here's related to that. I said it's important that you solve the problem, but have you ever said yes to a candidate where they didn't actually solve the problem?
I have to think a bit, but I think I have. I think sometimes it's been interesting because when we see a lot of the same solutions coming from a problem, but sometimes you see them taking very interesting routes as well, where the conversation and the solution gets very sometimes further away than you thought, but actually you see that there's actually a lot of potential because a person who can think in a very different way can actually be a great asset
Mhm.
as well, because then this collaboration will could bring you to a better solution. And sometimes we've had that okay, it might not be the exact what we were looking for, it might look a bit different, but actually there's been a lot of interesting innovation happening as well in their minds and through that interaction. So I think there has been a few. I think they've been close to the solution, but from a different perspective.
That's fair. I know I can think of one person where I said yes to who did not actually solve the problem, but this person never got to the finish line because they spent so much time thinking of all the different things that could go wrong along the way. And I thought, you know what, that's actually really valuable, right? Because there is this tendency of, just focus on, the so-called happy path, everything goes well, everything it works out, the remote service is always available and the answer, never has an error in it. And I really appreciated that this is a person who put some thought into, okay, what do we do when things go wrong, or how do we handle it, or how do we design the system, keeping in mind that things happen that are unexpected.
And I think it's like exactly like you can see that sometimes people can do very high level thinking of like, this is how the overview of the whole architecture would work, but also have the ability to go to details and have understanding that we should also focus on building these things, and that balance or that ability to do both is very valuable.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Do you think it is sort of valuable to start with, okay, here's the high level picture and move forward from there? Or is it better to just sort of dive right into some details?
I love going first high level, because I think you being able to simplify flows or complex things is actually a great asset to have. And it allows me as a product manager who sometimes don't understand very specific technical things to really kind of connect then the detail as well. So if someone would actually have that, okay, here's the overview in a minute, but okay, I'm now going to focus on this part and go a bit deeper, I would actually be like, wow, this person really is quite great at communication as well.
And a lot of advice says that you should start out by asking questions as opposed to jumping into a design. Do you agree with that advice, or is it not really necessary?
Absolutely. I think in these interviews, you sometimes need to make assumptions. And I think making assumptions will make your life easier, and communicating those assumptions is great. But also asking questions, maybe a few in the beginning, but also throughout the journey, actually allows you to, again, collaborate more. Oh, what did you think? Do you think, are you meaning this or this? Or maybe I'll rephrase, and you can say if I'm right, if I can continue this route. And that is, again, really validating that, okay, they're very good at communication. They want to collaborate, they want to understand, are they taking the right route, and asking questions can actually kind of stricten the scope for you as well, so you feel more confident going forward with your suggestions.
Okay. And I assume also that asking questions kind of makes sense if somebody gets stuck, but do you view it as a negative if they do get stuck?
Not at all. I actually sometimes like them being stuck, because that also allows you to see another side of the people. Are they getting frustrated, or are they getting more of like, I can figure this out? Are they getting more excited? And having a pause, having a think, taking a piece of paper, that's completely fine, and actually sometimes great, because then you can, again, like, throw a few hints, see how the person reacts, they ask a question. And also being comfortable being stuck in an interview is I kind of like seeing it, because you can see how the personality works through hard situations as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think there's sort of a perception that, oh, you have to, be confident to know everything, and it's not okay to admit that you don't know something, or to say that you're stuck. But like yourself, I don't see that as a negative if somebody says, they're not sure what to do here, and they want to take suggestions, because ultimately, right, that's an important part of working together. Not everybody has every answer, and you could spend a week stuck on this problem that your colleague could help you with, and you would have it solved in an hour. So I hear that.
Exactly. And I think it's like very connected to emotional intelligence as well. Like, you can see that when people take a step back and actually say something that, okay, I'm not great at this. This is not my strong suit.
Mm.
I need to think about it a bit. Maybe I've had a rough day.
Mm.
It actually shows your vulnerability. That is actually something I also highly value.
Mm.
In no matter who, in what kind of position people are.
Mm. Yeah. And is it important that the solution that they come up with could cover every detail? Is it okay to say, we'll leave that for future extension? Where do you draw the line on those?
Yeah, I think it's great to have like a few things that you dive a bit deeper and give examples and details and maybe your previous experience. But if you start doing it too much, I might sometimes start thinking, okay, is this person, are they able to also think of it a bit more higher level, or are they connected these tiny little details? Because we all know that in especially scale ups and startups, you will need to make those hard decisions on not building something or leaving these blind spots that might go wrong from a customer experience, but you
Mm.
also need to be comfortable with it. So I think there's a fine balance to going deep and diving deep
Mm.
in some cases. And I feel we have done that multiple times where we're like, okay, it's time to move on to maybe to this different part
Right.
and really guide the person as well, so they don't kind of go through the rabbit hole.
Yes, I think that makes sense. Right? If the goal is to produce a system, we can't focus too much on one component of it. And part of the process is saying, okay, we'll leave that for now. We'll come back to it. Or a solution that works 60% of the time is still a big improvement over the current situation where it works 0% of the time. So we would consider that an improvement and take some feedback based on that. On the subject of feedback,
Absolutely.
one of the things I really like is, okay, given a solution, okay, now I'm going to add a complication and sort of see what you do with it. So the system has scheduled downtime in this window. How do you make your system account for that?
Yeah, and for me, especially from a product perspective, who has a lot of passion and love for customers,
Hmm.
I especially love when engineers really take it not just from I'm building architecture here, I need to bring a solution, but they actually connect it with the customer. And it's something that you don't hear that often, but when someone says, well, if we think about the customers and what we're building, they might not be online on these times, so I would maybe make the downtime on these times when the usage might be really low
Hmm.
in certain area. And then you're like, great, like you're connecting the customer to what you're building, you're solving a customer problem,
Hmm.
you're kind of having also the understanding of the world. um is great. And I'm always like 10 points, like mentioning the customer like focused is so important to me. So I really highlight, I would always highlight that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good observation. And I also think that going alongside that, thinking about who your test users are is very important. And there are some things where actually it makes sense we should test this ourselves, release it internally, let our own team use it for a while and get some feedback. But yeah, how important is it that the design that they come up with also includes sort of a plan for how do you roll it out? How do you get feedback?
Yeah, and we've asked this like a few times in some of the interviews we've done, and it's interesting how you can see that some people are like, no, no, just release it for everyone, but that's quite rare.
Mm.
So mostly it is, but you can see that sometimes people think like, oh, test like who, like just customers, but then you can really be quite innovative, and here you see people who've maybe done it before, which is like, of course, it's a big feature. We really want to make sure it works. What about internally in the company first?
Mm.
Then we can release like for beta customers that really want to try new things, getting feedback here and there. And we've had a good example okay, how do you then know if this design is actually working for the customers and are they getting value from it?
Mhm.
And the answers also vary a lot of just create a survey and ask, which is very customer friendly.
Mhm.
But a lot of times people struggle a bit by using, well, if we use some tracking
Mhm.
in the front end, how about we see a certain values that from our backend and can actually analyze that. So there I've always seen a bit of struggles of like, how do you then test if it's valuable, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's fair. It is challenging to assess, whether something is working, whether it makes the user happy, and some combination of talking to them, but also internal metrics is probably good for at least getting a first look at how things are going, even if it might require some more observation or more investigation.
Exactly, and I do feel that mostly it's more for a product manager to have the own that part
Mm.
fully. But I think especially in highly technical solutions, there needs to be also collaboration where the engineers know that, oh, this is how we could actually also rate that. So it's like a low on the priority list when you think, is this person suitable? But it can also showcase quite great abilities in the future of like, oh, maybe you should actually belong in a team in the company that is um, is doing X or Y because you had certain assets that we noticed in the interview, right?
Yeah, and I think customer centricity is always a good way to think about design. Right? The ultimate goal of the company is to serve the customers, and if that sort of thinking is present at every level, you probably end up making good decisions about what we should do or not do to make that happen. So I'll turn it around
Absolutely.
just a little bit, and I'll say, what are some things that you don't want to see?
Oh, that's a great one. I don't want to see a one person talking the whole time. I think that just shows that, I think there's a phrase of like, the less you know, more confident, like the more the less you actually know, but the more you know, the more confident you are that you don't know something.
Mhm.
And I think that shows when we have interviews and someone is just having a monologue of talking, this is exactly how things should work. It it doesn't work like that in a team either. There needs to be collaboration and good conversation. So I think that's the number one. Um, what else? I think just having a positive feeling. And sometimes it's hard because you might have something's happened during the day and you still have the interview. Sorry, we're in London, so there's some ambulances around.
It
Um,
happens.
there we go. Where was I?
We're talking about
I
things we
had a
don't
thought.
want to see.
Yes. Um, there was, I had a thought about the second part.
Okay, maybe I'll go. Well, what do you think of it?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
one thing that I don't want to see, I would describe as sort of resistance to feedback. That if a solution is proposed and we say, well, that's not going to work because of this, but then the candidate is arguing about it, and not necessarily in a good way, but just sort of not willing to change what they've done or what they've discussed based on this new information. I don't like to see that. And I also don't like to see sort of the we give up, right? The saying, okay, this problem can't be solved. There's nothing we can do about it, and that's the end of it. And there are some problems that you can't get around, but for the most part, I think it's much more positive to say, all right, here are some things I think we could try, or even just, what, we have to do some research to try to figure out if there is a way around it. If there's a limitation of some sort, can we work around it? And sometimes it's not even a technical solution. Sometimes it's a business solution. Like, can you pay for a higher level of service from a partner? is a valid option, but I don't like it when somebody just says, well, I guess there's nothing we can do.
Exactly, and that was my previous point, kind of this, you want to be positive and friendly to each other. So sometimes you see that there's like a negative attitude towards the interviewers, or overall, like sometimes it's okay to also say, hey, today is not actually working, I have some personal things I need to sort, could we move it to next week? Because it's better to have an interview a bit later where you actually feel good about you and the environment, and because you can see when people come in with a bad mindset, and it really impacts the interview as well.
Okay, well, that's a good observation. Is there anything else you think that someone who is interviewing in this kind of interview should know? Something that would be helpful to them? Hints, suggestions?
I think the main few things is like coming with a positive attitude. When it's a design interview, when there's a problem, really feel free to think of it as a team challenge and not a solo challenge, where you collaborate, you ask questions, you can make assumptions, but just communicate when you're making them. And take those pauses, have a piece of paper, draw things out. That always helps me to kind of reiterate on problems, but also simplify things and don't over engineer. So like you said, sometimes you might go so deep and have so detailed things. So feel free to have a balance between like simplicity, have an overview, give examples and dive deeper in some points, but always jump back to the main like points.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I would add to that, so release yourself from the obligation of thinking that it has to be perfect on the first iteration, that it's okay if you say, all right, the first thing that I'm going to do is this, and maybe in the first version, you only consider what happens when everything goes right. And so once you have a workflow start to finish, then you can go back and say, all right, now I'm going to add this because sometimes messages get lost, or I'm going to retry every night if that's what's necessary to account for the fact that things sort of don't always work as expected, or don't go perfectly. So I think something like that is kind of important to keep in mind. And I would also add, we talked about earlier, sort of starting with this high level view, that getting some feedback on that high level view before you dive into any of the details is important, because it shows, okay, we understand the big picture, we understand where it's going. And so even if one of those components doesn't work out, or we run out of time to talk about it, you're still showing that you understand the problem and what does the solution look like.
Exactly, and I think a really good point as well, that the interviewers are not perfect. So I've made multiple mistakes explaining a case in a very bad way, and of course you get better and better by it, but I've multiple times explained a case in a bit confusing way, which has caused probably the interviewee being like, wait, I might not understand. And this is where being comfortable asking questions will help you, because then it will clarify what we're doing, it will clarify the case, and get you in a better position. And it's good to have that mindset as well, that it's okay, did I understand this correctly, did you mean it by this? And it can help you to get a few steps further again.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think that covers, what we wanted to talk about today. So once again, thank you for joining me. And I hope that people find this to be useful in terms of understanding what interviewers are looking for in a system design interview. So thanks for coming on the show, Miia.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure.